Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments. And for those keeping track, all 5 of you, this is part 11 of my 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. Now, I am determined to get through all of these questions. So unfortunately, I do have some news here. This isn't going to be the grand finale, but we are starting to inch closer. This Q&A may actually end with part 13, which would be kind of freaky. I don't know if I'm going to allow that. We may have to do a part 14 or try to answer all the questions in part 12 just to avoid having this end as a 13-part series. I'm just very superstitious in that way. So let's just see how many questions we can get through today. So let's dive right in. You guys know the drill. Here's the first question. What's your opinion on the soccer memorabilia market and soccer trading card markets in particular? Okay, this is a very niche market. Obviously, it should come as no surprise. If you live in the United States, if you're investing in sports cards and sports memorabilia in the United States, the top 3 markets are, of course, baseball, football, basketball. Then if we're talking about sports memorabilia, you will sometimes see an uptick in like boxing memorabilia, but just sticking to sports cards. The top 3 markets are always going to be baseball, football, and basketball with few exceptions. Now, if you're somebody that really has an interest in the soccer market, the soccer field, you want to diversify in this, do so cautiously if you're doing it from an investment standpoint. That is the best advice I can give you. Now, it's also true, and I have to state this as a caveat. Remember, I live in the United States. Collecting is worldwide. So obviously, if you go over to Great Britain, you go over to certain parts of Europe, if you go to certain parts of South America, soccer, which is sometimes referred to as football, is more popular in those countries. But if you are in the US, keep in mind, soccer is always going to be a niche market in the sports memorabilia, sports trading card market when compared to the big boys, baseball, football, and basketball. There is never going to be a point in time where a soccer trading card or an item of that nature is going to surpass the importance and collectability of, say, a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card. Just to put that in perspective for you. So good question. It's a fair question. Again, I'm not saying you can't make money in this market. I'm just saying don't go all in. Just be very careful in this market if you are attempting to invest from a financial perspective. Next question. Sean, congrats on 18,000 subscribers. I wanted to ask about vintage non-sports cards, such as presidential or other cards from the late 1800s or early 1900s. Seems they have recently increased in value. Do you think they will continue to increase, or is there a limiting factor due to some cards being too rare, or is this market too niche? Well, first of all, when you get into this field, these are pretty much what's known as antique trading cards. There is some historical value here because these are traditional antiques per se. That says it is a niche market. If someone's going to want to invest in something, let's say, that has to do with a former president from the 1800s, or even, heaven forbid, if we go all the way back to the founding of the United States, 1776, if they want to invest in something related to George Washington, they're probably going to look for something historically significant related to George Washington, assuming they can afford the cost of going after an item like that. So there has been an uptick in this market. I honestly attribute the uptick in this market to demand for sports cards and other related trading cards. Believe it or not, there's a lot of collectors right now that are just going all in the trading card market, regardless of whether or not it's collectible card games like Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, or sports cards, or even non-sports cards. That's why we're even seeing a tick up in a lot of the esoteric trading cards, like Star Wars trading cards that were put out by Topps, some of your wacky packages cards, Garbage Pail Kids, Mars Attacks cards. A lot of that stuff, too, has shot up in value over the last few years. And again, the reason for that is because, once again, trading cards are very hot, especially with the advent of third-party grading. But to answer your question in particular, if you are going after items like this, again, it is a niche market. Again, not to say you can't make money here, But from an investment standpoint, you have to see the market for what it truly is. And again, it's not on par with Pokemon. It is not on par with most sports trading cards. So just keep that in mind if you're going after these pieces. Next question. Sean, I have never heard you address the anime, manga related collectibles market like cells, original art, and first print and first appearance manga. Since last year, Beckett has also been grading manga. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is it comparable to the comic market in a way? I did a full video on this. I understand you asked this question several months before that video premiered. I am just now getting to your question. I would encourage you to watch that video. I answer all these questions and more. Manga is a niche market. There is opportunity there, but what you have to understand, there are significant cultural differences between American comic collectors and the fact that comic books are a strictly American art form versus that as the way the Japanese view manga and also their types of art forms. So it comes down to a cultural thing and also the fact that it would really be the Western culture, Western audiences from the US and Europe that would make manga pop. It would not be the Japanese culture themselves. And this is true even if we look at other collecting fields. I bring this up in that video that I did on manga. If you look at the value of US Pokemon cards, vintage Pokemon cards, compared to their Japanese counterparts, yes, you can argue it's easier to get a PSA 10 in Japanese format cards because they were created with a higher level of quality, but overall, the prices should not be as far a spread as they are, meaning US cards tend to be worth a lot more than their Japanese counterparts simply because American audiences value third-party grading and they value items like Pokemon more than Japan and Japanese collectors, even though Pokemon is a Japanese property. The same thing is true with vintage video games. This really gets under my skin, but I will often see a graded, factory sealed, now to be fair, original Nintendo Famicom, which was known as the Nintendo Entertainment System in the US. The Japanese version, Famicom games, were not technically shrink wrapped. So they were just kept in the box and you went and bought them and there was no outer wrap on those games if you purchased them in Japan. But there's an ample supply of those games that are factory sealed per se and are graded by companies like VGA. And they're on the market in existence. They're brand new condition and they don't sell anywhere near the US versions of those games. Case in point, the actual first printing of The Legend of Zelda hit the Japanese market and it was released for the Nintendo Famicom Disk System. Even a copy of that game in brand new condition sells for it's like 1% of the value of a factory sealed US copy of The Legend of Zelda that was released in 1987 for the original Nintendo Entertainment System. This is the infamous gold-colored cartridge version, of course. The reason for that is because the Japanese don't value this stuff the way that Western audiences do. And that's a major problem for manga going forward. That said, is there opportunity in that market? Absolutely. If you can convince Western audiences, the US and European audiences who value manga to pay for it and pay a premium for it, there will be an investment grade market opening up for those items in the future. It's just a big what if. That's why I usually give the advice if people want to speculate in that market, go in easy and always have an exit plan, meaning don't overpay for the stuff. But at least if you can break even with all your expenses, if you need to get out at any given time, you're doing fine because there's no guarantee that market's going to pop, but there is a lot of opportunity out there depending on how much capital you want to risk. So that's really how I answer that. Next question, and this is an interesting question because I've answered this many times now. I understand that this person may be a new subscriber to this channel. Maybe he doesn't know my stance on this, and I want to preface this with, for those that are unaware, I have a rare coin, rare currency collection valued at, I think, close to a little over $200,000 at present time. I've done videos showing key pieces from those collections. on this channel in the past. So I do want to state that before we get to this question. You're going to see where I'm going with this and why I invest so heavily in that market. So here is the question. Why do you think historical currency will carry on past the boomers? We are moving to a cashless society. Coin collectors are few and far between. That is 100% incorrect, guys. The highest market cap in the antiques and collectibles trade is obviously high-end art. Do you want to know what market has the second highest market cap of all antiques and collectibles? Coins and currency. There are more collectors, dealers, and investors operating in the coin and currency marketplace at any given time than any other market in the antiques and collectibles trade. This is evident even if you watch Pawn Stars. If you look, Rick, the Pawn Star guys, they usually pay up for coins and currency. That is the most liquid market in the antiques and collectibles trade. Number one, a lot of these pieces represent the financial history of the United States, of the countries they represent, because I also want to include world currency and coins in this as well. If you are educated in finance, you are more likely to collect coins and currency than any other collectible in existence. There are many Wall Street titans. There are many billionaires out there, multimillionaires, that collect and diversify in coins and currency. I don't know where this idea that coin collectors are few and far between is coming from. Heritage generates so much of their revenue just from coins and currency alone. They give massive attention to those sales, more so than Pokemon, more so than video games, more so than comic books. You have to put this in perspective. It is not just baby boomers that are going after coins and currency. As a matter of fact, if you look at the demographics, right now, it's Gen Xers like myself and millennials that are spending a lot of money in coins. Now, why you don't see so many young people like my age, 50 or younger, at coin conventions is simply because we have different buying habits. We tend to do our business online with companies like Stocks and Bowers, Heritage Auctions, Great Collections, or we work directly with dealers. If you want a list, just email me. I can give you a list of prominent coin dealers. Now, you're going to have to spend like several $1,000s per coin because, again, I'm in the high end of the pool. But I can give you a list of coin dealers that a lot of us work with, and that's where we choose to do business. That's why if someone tells you, well, Sean, there's a lot of people going to like the Wizard Comic Con, but when it comes to a coin convention, I only see a couple of older people there. It's because most of us know the good stuff is online. We don't have to travel to conventions to get it. And number two, the transaction is also private. If I'm going to spend $10,000 on a coin, do you really want to think I want to go down to the Whitman show in Baltimore, take the risk in a city I'm unaware of, buy a $10,000 coin, put it in my pocket, and walk out to my car or hotel? That's not something I want to be placed in because it's not a good environment from a security aspect. I don't mind spending $7,000, $10,000 through a dealer or through an online auction house. Do you see the point? Because the transaction's private. You go on to state, where's the new blood that cares about currency as a collectible or historical document? Well, my friend, if you actually paid attention to this market and actually did the research, instead of just coming here and asking me to do it for you, you would see that since the pandemic, coins and currency shot into the stratosphere, and there was not the amount of pullback in that market that there was in, say, the graded video game market, the comic book market, which, by the way, is in the toilet right now. And to be fair, I have close to $100,000 invested in that market as well. Knock, knock. And also the Pokemon market. There was a massive pullback in collectible markets. Coins and currency were pretty much, how do I want to say this, insulated against that. Especially given the fact right now that gold is trending at all-time high prices, that has actually helped prop up the market for rare coins. And that's why I tell you guys, if you are going to diversify in a market in the antiques and collectibles trade, if you want to do so from an educational standpoint over the long term, coins and currency are your best bet. And I keep getting accused where I'm propping up this market. Look, guys, I have tons of money allocated to other collecting categories. I've done very well in those markets. But I'm here to tell you, the reason why I put so much attention and emphasis on this channel for coins and currency is because that is one of the key markets that make up the antiques and collectibles trade. I don't think some of you understand. If there would be a massive pullback in that market, it would spread to every single other collecting category to the point where the whole entire antiques and collectibles trade would also face a massive pullback. That's what happened during the financial crisis. There were opportunities in a lot of these markets. And when the antique, coin, and currency market started to pull back, that's when I saw, okay, this is going to spread to everything. And it did. Do you guys understand? You can really gauge the pulse of the entire antiques and collectibles trade just by looking at what coins and currency are doing. It's amazing how that works. And that's why I keep saying, if you guys would actually read the books that I recommend on this channel, you would learn this. All this would become first-rate knowledge rather than you guys having to come and argue with me about this. Your final question is, why is currency not the same thing as stamp collecting? Because once again, stamp collecting, yes, it is somewhat historic, but it is also a limited niche market. Currency is based on the history of the financial stability and economy of any nation. Meaning if we look at the US, the reason why there are so many dollars chasing historical pieces of currency is because of what it represents. I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you want to invest in currency, especially in the US, the market pretty much revolves around large size silver and gold certificates, and everything else circles that. The reason why silver and gold large size certificates are such sought after pieces of history in the United States is because that is what our nation's money supply is based on. That is the origins of money in its original form, going back to when we used silver and gold coins. Okay? That's all I'm going to say on this. You're welcome to do your own research. You're welcome to disagree. And I want to make this very clear. I am not telling you that you should definitely invest in coins and currency. It's a very sophisticated market. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get slapped in the face with a stale donut. Then you're going to come screaming at me that I don't know what I'm talking about because you lost your proverbial ass. However, if you have the patience, you have the money, and you have the understanding, and you want to take time to research this market, it can be a very rewarding market over the long term. I would make an immense amount of money on my personal coin and currency collection if I chose to sell it at present time. The reason why I'm not is I'm not there yet, but I would profit substantially from that market because of the amount of patience and research I put into acquiring those pieces. Again, I implore you, I did a video where I show off very small part of my large size currency collection. That video has, I think, well over 30 to 40,000 views at present time. I did another video where I show part of my rare coin collection. I think that video has 20 to 30,000 views at present time. I encourage you to watch those videos with an open mind and read the books that I recommend if you really want to learn the coin and currency marketplace. Next question. Sean, I have told people that one of the main ingredients for a collectible to stand the test of time is that it has absolute rarity combined with organic collectability. What do you think on this statement? I think it's 50% correct. I think what you got to understand is it's really all about demand. The secret to making money in the antiques and collectibles trade is following demand. Case in point, I've said this many times now. If you collect comic books, a copy of Giant Size X-Men 1, or Amazing Spider-Man 300, or Incredible Hulk 181, or Amazing Spider-Man 129 are not rare by any means. Even those of you that argue with me, Sean, there's only 219 or 220 copies of Giant Size X-Men 1 in CGC 9.8. What's my argument to that? You don't have to buy it in 9.8 condition. There's thousands of copies on the CGC census out there of that book alone. These books are not rare, but they sell for a premium because, number one, comic books have organic collectability, and number two, there's a lot of demand for those issues. An item doesn't have to be truly rare to be valuable in the collectible sphere, even in the antique sphere. That said, believe it or not, most collectibles that are valuable aren't all that rare. I mean, in all honesty, I'm going to be honest with you. If we look at the census reports for a copy of Action Comics 1 or Detective Comics 27, you aware there's roughly 80 copies of each of those books out there that are graded. Now, you may look at me and say, well, Sean, only 80 copies. Doesn't that qualify as rare? In all honesty, I grew up learning hardcore antiques, art, and collectibles. So I'm here to tell you, 80 copies is defined as scarce. That's really not rare. A copy of Action Comics 1 is not rare. Now, you can argue if you have a copy in 9.0 condition, you have something that is conditionally rare due to the grade. But that's why a lot of people get caught up in the hype with the antiques and collectibles trade. They don't even know the true definition of rare. That's why I tell you guys, if you're trying to determine whether to buy something or whether to hold something for the long term, or even if to sell into the hype, always look at the level of demand in the current market. Case in point, back during the pandemic, you could have sold a copy of Amazing Spider-Man 300 in CGC 9.8 condition into the marketplace for like 10 grand. I remember my Incredible Hulk 181, CGC 9.4 back then was worth like 20 grand and I didn't sell it. I could kick myself. Today, look at what those comic books are worth in the open market. You see what I'm saying? Demand is most important in the antiques and collectibles trade. And this is what, it's very interesting. The people that come to me and argue about Pokemon, they don't understand this core concept. It has nothing to do with supply. It's all about demand. And I hate to say this to you guys that are putting all your money in modern era Pokemon cards and products right now. If that demand pulls back, what do you think is going to happen? The value of your holdings is going to fall because everybody is hoarding this stuff, meaning modern era Pokemon cards in factory sealed condition. It is readily available. It is not rare. Please do not make the mistake of thinking just because right now we have a bunch of Timmys, Kimmys, and Poindexters pushing 13-year-old kids out of the way to get modern era Pokemon cards and flipping it for 2, 3, 4 times their value on eBay. That does not mean these items are quote unquote rare. It means they're in demand. Eventually that demand is going to pull back. It is not going to grow exponentially like you guys think. This is why me and Rudy are in agreement 100%, Rudy with Alpha Investments, that most likely Pokemon is not going to outperform the S&P 500 going forward. I've been telling you that now for several years on this channel, trying to get you guys to understand that the most important aspect when investing in the antiques and collectibles trade is demand. Always remember that. Next question. Sean, what role does inflation or economic downturns play in collectible markets? Well, obviously, when it comes to inflation, if people have less money to spend or invest or spend as discretionary income, it can affect the collectibles market. On the flip side, an economic downturn, obviously, if you don't have a job, if you can't take care of yourself, your family, or get your basic needs met, you're not going to be going to the market. You're not going to be buying Pokemon cards. You're not going to be buying video games. You're not going to be buying comic books. You're probably not going to be buying even rare coins. Right now, believe it or not, the high-end art market has faced a pullback because a lot of the billionaire class that deals in that market has says, whoa, there's a little bit too much economic uncertainty out there. I'm going to take a wait-and-see attitude before I pull the plug or pull the trigger. Sorry, not pull the plug. Pull the trigger on this high-end piece of art that is coming up for bid. And this is really rocking the high-end art market because there's only a handful of players that can afford those top-tier pieces. Now, obviously, certain pieces of art are still selling for record sums. If you look up what a Banksy is going for right now, obviously it's selling for a significantly high price. Warhols are still selling for significantly high prices. So are Jackson Pollocks. But there's not a lot of record-breaking sales hitting the high-end art market as of late because a lot of the people that play in that market have pulled back. And remember, when we're dealing with pieces that cost tens of millions of dollars, there's only a handful of players that can choose to allocate capital to that market. So again, coming back to where demand is the most important aspect of the market, if there's less demand, what happens to the prices of available supply out there? Prices fall. And this is also having a cascading effect, because now you have people that are going, well, gee, I have this Jackson Pollock that is valued at 40 to 50 million. If I sell it now, what if it only goes for 37 million? I'm going to lose possibly my proverbial ass. So now I'm not going to even consign the piece to auction to begin with, because demand is drying up. So this can really affect collectible markets. Now, make no mistake, everything will work out in the end. Sotheby's, Christie's, Bonavens, all these top auction houses, Phillips, they're not going to go bankrupt anytime soon. You don't have to worry. But overall, just know that it's very interesting to see how economic downturns affect collectible markets. Now, let me tell you a story in reverse. This is very interesting. During the 2008-2009 financial crisis, a lot of collectible markets, when the stock market dropped off a cliff, when the real estate market collapsed, when the government was rushing to inject liquidity into the market, there was a pullback in a lot of collectible markets. And one interesting development occurred with coins specifically. Rare coins were first to recover. Do you want to know why? Because prices of gold and silver started their incline and uptick after the financial crisis. So right around 2010, 2011, prices for rare coins started to escalate once again. Now, you also had the development of CAC stickering, which came on the scene, if I remember correctly, I think it was it 2007, 2008? It was right around that point in time where CAC came onto the market, and that acted as a catalyst as well. And that really reassured a lot of high-end collectors and investors of coins to at least know the market was recovering quickly. That's why, going back to one of the earlier questions I was asked, that's why I tell you, if you actually study the coin and currency market, you're going to learn it's one of the most sophisticated and stable markets in the entire antiques and collectibles trade. Note, that doesn't mean you can't lose money in that market, but just know there's a reason a lot of people choose to diversify capital to that market. Next question. Oh, here's a good one. Sean, what modern Pokemon cards do you think will stand the test of time? Cards like Umbreon and the Bubble Mew are on fire right now, but do you think they will still be strong in 10 plus years? Thank you for everything you do. Here's my problem with modern era Pokemon cards. It used to be back in the coveted vintage era, back when Pokemon was introduced into North America. We're going to start there because I remember this very vividly. Remember, I graduated high school in 1995. eBay came into existence in September of 1995. So the Pokemon boom, I remember it vividly. I was there for the whole thing. And my nephew, who still loves Pokemon to this day, he's in his 30s, he grew up with Pokemon. So I remember him going and wanting to get all of these cards, and I remember my parents, his grandparents, buying tons of this stuff, paying a premium for it. So I do remember a lot of the early Pokemon boom. And at that particular point in time, most people that got these cards, they opened the pack and they put them in a 3-ring binder. There was no really third-party grading that had taken hold at that point in time. Today, if somebody opens one of these cards, the first thing that they do, they're probably wearing gloves when they open it. They put it in a sleeve and they get ready to send it to the third-party grading company, typically PSA at present time. It's either PSA or CGC. And what happens is that is creating a mass problem for a lot of these Pokemon collectors going forward, because everything is in near mint plus, PSA 9, PSA 10 condition. It's graded. Population reports are already documenting how many are out there. And we still have Timmys, Kimmys, and Poindexters that are choosing to overpay for this over-hoarded, overproduced stuff. My point is, back in the 1990s, early 2000s, people appreciated the Pokemon cards. People played the game. Today, it is looked at solely as an investment. That doesn't mean the people that are investing in this market don't have a genuine passion or love for the game, for the franchise, but it just means it's cause to have concern. So are there going to be certain cards that were produced in, say, the year 2025 or 2026 or even 2024 for that matter, that are going to be worth money in the future, meaning if you would have bought them now, you hold them, you can make a substantial profit on them 10, 20 years from now? Yes, I do believe there are. But it's going to be awfully hard to pick those cards because everything is getting graded and treated almost like a commodity. Meaning people are opening these packs with gloves, they're sending them to the grading company sending them back, and all of a sudden, I have a PSA 10 Umbreon, I have a PSA 10 Mew, I have a whatever it is, Charizard, whatever. And that's a problem. And a lot of these companies, specifically the Pokemon company, a lot of these companies that produce collectible trading cards, whether it's on the collectible card game end or on the sporting card end, they know now that mass-produced scarcity is king. So they know how to limit some of these cards while also increasing the amount of product, different sets, different items that they have available on the market to make up for that lost profit. And that's what the Pokemon is 100% good at right now. The Pokemon community single-handedly convinced a lot of people out there that they know how to run this business. And I give them credit because they've avoided a lot of the pitfalls that the sports card industry couldn't avoid back during the junk wax era of the 80s and early 90s. But there's still a lot of risk in this market. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there on the internet that are telling people there's no risk to this market, it's all upside. Again, I do not think that Pokemon is going to outperform the S&P 500 index fund going forward. Now, I know there's going to be several smart Alecs over there that are going to, how do I want to say this, manipulate the data to show that it does. Meaning, they're going to go, well, Sean, if you would have invested in these 2 sets or these 3 sets going forward, you would have outperformed the S&P 500. The problem is that's not how Pokemon investors and speculators operate. They want to own everything from Pokemon. And it's very hard, I can tell you this, it's very hard to pick out which sets, what booster boxes, what items are going to be the bona fide hits going forward. Meaning predicting demand 6 months out is very easy. We can do this in almost any collecting category. Predicting demand 10 to 20 years out, if you can do that, let me know, because obviously you have a crystal ball. Because I'm an expert in the antiques and collectibles trade, I can't do that. Harry Rinker couldn't do that back in the 80s and 90s. A lot of high-profile auction companies that pay people to be the head consignment directors of their said departments, whether it's collectible card games, video games, coins, currency, traditional antiques, comic books, they can't do that either. So if you have that gift, please let me know, because obviously you're dabbling in the mystical arts. You're doing something that's pretty freaky that I really want to know, because I'm a freaky guy myself. So you let me know if you have the ability to do that. We're going to take a few more questions in this segment. Then I do want to end it. Obviously, there's going to be a part 12. We'll see if we have to do a part 13, as I said in the beginning of this. So let's see where we're going to go with this. Sean, congrats on hitting 18,000 subscribers. You should do a live Q&A someday. Oh, Lord, we're not at that point, thank God, yet. I would probably need close to 50 to 100,000 subscribers to actually do a live Q&A. I don't think this channel will ever get to that point, but again, I've been wrong. I didn't think this channel would get past 1,000 subscribers. I thought I'd be deleting this channel within 6 months of creating it. As a matter of fact, I was kind of hoping that would happen, because then I could say, see that? I tried to teach collectible finance. Nobody cared. I got to delete the channel, and now I get to go hide in my own little private world of my own creation. You guys should know I'm a very private person. So that's why when this channel kind of started to blow up, I kind of got really scared. My anxiety was through the roof. So going on, you say, I do have a question though. Is it time to invest in Elon's crypto coin, meme coins, Trump coins, cryptocurrency? You guys should know I am not a fan of cryptocurrency. I've said this multiple times now. Again, if you want to diversify part of your assets into cryptocurrency, just make it a small portion and you should be okay if that's what you want to do. I am not a fan of any type of cryptocurrency. I have considered at some point, I'm going to look at the future and what the future holds, devoting like 1 or 2% of my net worth to something like IBIT, which is an ETF that is geared towards Bitcoin specifically, Maybe something like that, but I am not an overall fan of cryptocurrency. I am not a fan of precious metals, believe it or not. When I invest in rare coins, I go after significantly rare coins, meaning if I'm going to pay $10,000 for a rare gold coin, obviously $10,000 is more than the cost of an ounce of gold, so I'm paying a premium because of the rarity of the coin. I'm not investing in rare coins because they're made of either silver or gold. So keep that in mind, guys. When I look at my assets and the way that I construct my portfolio, which entails financial assets, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, index funds, which are the bulk of it, ETFs, real estate, collectibles, I look at how much is devoted to items that have underlying cash flows. And that's why I tell you guys, if you really want to get independently wealthy, you need to invest in assets that have underlying cash flows. Good way to do that, low-cost index funds. Get yourself a total world stock index fund, S&P 500 index fund, total stock market index fund. Take your pick. Build a portfolio with index funds and hold it through thick and thin and continue to add to it. 20 to 30 years, depending on how much you put into it, you'll be pretty much set. You'll be on your way. You'll have 6 to 7 figures. I can tell you that. Okay? So that's really my thought on cryptocurrency. I am not a fan. I am still not a fan of Bitcoin. I consider it a very highly speculative asset with very little underlying use, other than, of course, in illegal activity. As a matter of fact, I often tell people, I get this question a lot. Sean, if you had to choose between solely cryptocurrency or precious metals, what would you choose? Well, I've just said I don't like either, but obviously if I had to pick one, precious metals. Because at least with gold, you actually have an item in physical form that can be used for a variety of industrial uses. You can make jewelry out of it. You can make a gold necklace, give it to your girlfriend, whatever. You know what I mean? It at least has uses. Whereas cryptocurrency, really the only use is, I hate to say this, illegal activity. It doesn't even work well as an inflationary hedge. If you don't believe me, go back and look at the volatile price of Bitcoin, of cryptocurrency, during the last couple of years where inflation reared its ugly head. It did not protect you as well as a well-diversified portfolio. Even a stock and bond portfolio mix actually protected you better than cryptocurrency. And that's my problem with that asset in a nutshell. Next question. Sean, congrats and hopefully more to come. Curious about any insight or overview as to the collectability value of pre-code EC comics in regards to the market versus Marvel and DC. Okay, in all honesty, I like EC comics. The problem is with EC comics, again, this is a niche market. It is part of the golden age. Just keep in mind, especially when we come to the Gaines file copies, there's a lot of these out there circulating on the market. If you buy right, there is opportunity in this market. Just keep in mind, horror comics are still second behind superhero comic books. So that's something else you have to deal with. It doesn't mean that these comic books are going to die out anytime soon. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying when we look at the comic book market by and large, EC comic books, while they're prominent, why they do have a core audience, they are also a niche market in the trade. So I have nothing against them. But what I would tell you is, if you're diversifying capital towards comic books, I hate to say it, you're going to have to put some of that money into, of course, superhero comic books made by the big boys, Marvel and DC. Then if you want to diversify, if you want to build a collection of high-grade EC comic books, that's fine. Just don't put all of your resources in that one niche market. You have to be careful. EC comics also shot up in value over the last 10 years to the point where some of them are getting to pretty scary heights. I'm not going to lie. Even with the pullback in the comic book market, there's some EC books that I look at and I just go, no, I would never pay that for that. So just be careful if you're parking money into that specific niche market. You go on to state, with the historical weight of the comics code, book burnings, and seemingly slim availability of some of the books. Thanks for the valuable information on all things collectible. Yes, I am taking that all into account. I understand that EC comics were targeted back in the 1950s. What was the book, the famous book? Was it Seduction of the Innocent? That went against the comic book industry at that particular point, claiming that Violent comic books were warping children's minds. We went through it. If you're a member of Generation X, I'm sure that you remember Satanic Panic in the late 80s. And then we also had, of course, the Night Trap Mortal Kombat scare, where now video games had to be graded because everybody was, of course, being possessed by Doom, Mortal Kombat, and Dana Plato from Different Strokes being pursued by vampires and shit in Night Trap. Every generation pretty much goes through this. There's always something. I remember gangster rap was supposed to turn us all into like thugs and killers and thieves and murderers and, you know, hoes and pimps and all this shit. Remember when that happened? They always try to blame something, okay? So I am aware of all that took place in the 1950s with the book, The Seduction of the Innocent. I will tell you, I'm taking that all into account to give you my response here. So just tread carefully in this market. Obviously, the key EC comics are going to be the ones that you're going to want to go after more so than the lesser common, the lesser known EC comics. Like I do know, like Vault of Horror, Tales from the Crypt, with some of the other ones, Shock Suspense Stories. There's a lot of them readily available on the market. And yes, if they come up for bid in near mint better condition, they do okay on the market. But some of them, I'm just saying, with all the Gaines file copies out there, some of them are selling at ridiculous premiums, even today in the year 2025, in my opinion. You can disagree with this analysis, but just keep in mind, it is a niche market. We're going to take one or two, few more questions here, just so that we can sum up part 11 of the 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. So here we go. Sean, how do you keep your collections of different antiques and collectibles coherently organized? Do you believe surges in collectible categories have more of a predictable cycle? Or do you believe surges are based more on random events that can't be predicted? Okay, this is a multifaceted question. So first, how do you keep your collections of different antiques and collectibles coherently organized? Well, right now, because I'm also approaching 50, I tend to go after a lot of, for my hardcore long-term holdings, I tend to go after graded, third-party graded collectibles that are neat and small and can fit into a safety deposit box. So that's really what I like investing in right now. That said, I do speculate on other collectibles like, of course, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, video games, Lego, Nintendo Amiibo, the whole 9 yards. A lot of that stuff is kept organized in specific rooms. I also do use climate-controlled storage for a lot of these items. I have a ton of stuff that is sitting in climate-controlled storage. It is all organized. A lot of it is in like Rubbermaid containers that have the enclosed lid. I use a lot of that and shelving, and I can protect the items, make sure that they're kept in mint condition or better, factory sealed condition. That's pretty much how I go about that. I also use a spreadsheet to keep track of everything, whether it's my speculative collectibles, items that I just have for fun. Like obviously I have a Nintendo Switch collection. I really like Nintendo Switch. Or if it's the items that I'm truly investing into long-term, like rare coins, currency, Star Wars proof cards, Pokemon cards, any of that stuff, comic books, all that is stored in on a spreadsheet. Then, of course, I do have, if you walk around my house, you can see some of these examples. I do, of course, have traditional antiques. I have movie posters. I have pieces of art. All that's also tracked, just in case. So I do track it with spreadsheets, and I try to store it as organizingly best as I can through the use of safety deposit boxes for a lot of the higher end stuff that can fit in safety deposit boxes. If not, I do like to use climate-controlled off-site storage. So that answers that question. Your next question is, do you believe surges in collectible categories behave more like a predictable cycle? Certain markets, yes. If we look at coins and currency, we have several hundred years, if not 1,000 years, depending on how far back you really want to go. Now, most people obviously collect U.S. coins if you live in the U.S. So you have several hundred years of data. So yes, there are predictable market cycles that occur in that market. Boom and bust cycles, just like the overall economy. Now, part of that is due to the fact that that is a very mature, sophisticated market. It also is somewhat correlated to the price of silver and gold. Like obviously right now with gold trending at an all-time high, there's a lot of demand for gold coins. Even rare gold coins that command a numismatic premium on the secondary market are selling very well right now as a result of that. There is a direct link and correlation between those markets. When we look at the pop culture side, I did a video several years back that talks about collectibles being rooted in nostalgia and antiques being rooted in history. When we start to look at collectibles, there really are no predictable cycles, because the lifespan of a collectible, if it doesn't become a sought-after antique, the lifespan of a collectible is linear. Antiques are more cyclical. So for instance, if you look at the rare book market, if you want to get yourself a copy, like I own a first edition copy of The Great Gatsby. It's one of my favorite books of all time. If you wanted to buy that book, if you look at the market for rare books and you go back like 20 to 30 years, you will see there are periods of high demand, periods of low demand in that market. So you can kind of gauge whether or not it's a good time to buy that book, or hey, prices are getting a little frothy, I better wait. So that's how you analyze these markets. Antique markets are more cyclical. Collectible markets are more linear. For instance, I'll use this as a great example. If we look at pre-Nintendo video games, or even Pez dispensers, a lot of those markets were very hot in the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s was the peak for pre-Nintendo video games. You had Atari 2600, Atari 5200, Atari 7800, and television, Coleco, Commodore, Apple. All that stuff was trending at all-time high prices. As a matter of fact, I know this perfectly because I was there. That's where I made the bulk of my money. Back when digital press was a major force in the vintage video game space, back along the internet when it was first created, right around the early 1990s, early 2000s. I think digital press still exists. Joe Santilli and crew. I think they actually have a store that they opened up. Very great guys, excellent, great group. Well, when they came on the scene, it pretty much caused a massive speculative bubble in pre-Nintendo video games. Today, sure, there are certain Atari games that sell for a premium, but if you would have invested in those items back during that bubble and you would have kept your money in that market, today, you would have lost your proverbial ass, because I know people that have done it. And this is what I mean. That market is pretty much linear. There's a lot of people that are predicting, well, Atari was first in the video game space. Therefore, there's going to be a resurgence in demand for a lot of your early Atari and television, ColecoVision systems. That'll never happen. There might be a little bit of blips as people discover it, but it's never, ever going to be, on par with demand for vintage Nintendo systems and games. Let's put it that way. So pretty much Atari, ColecoVision, and television, that's all ran its course. It's not to say there aren't fans out there that still buy that stuff. Believe it or not, there is a company out there that holds the rights to Atari, notice the way that I worded that still produces games and systems. I think they just released, what is it, the 2600 Plus, or the 7800 Plus, or the Atari 400 Mini. There are still fans that are attracted to that, but it's not commanding the high prices that it was in the late 1990s, early 2000s. That's an example of a collectible market that is perfectly linear. Same thing with Pez. Pez are not coming back. I get emails all the time. Sean, you don't understand. The Pez company is going to be almost 100 years of age within, I think it's either this year or next year, that the company turns 100 years of age. And I keep trying to tell people, guess what? They still make Beanie Babies too. You see the point? You can have a company that's still in business that they produced a product that became collectible and then died out, and the company is still in business to this very day. It doesn't matter as much as you guys think. That's why I always caution you guys about Funko Pops, about all this stuff that has very little organic collectability. Even Pokemon, there can come a time where the Pokemon company puts out a product and it sells, but there's no secondary market for that product. That could happen. Theoretically, it's unlikely to happen because with collectible card games, the secondary market is pretty much the market for that said collectible. But just keep in mind, that can happen. So you have to be very careful when you analyze these markets. You go on to ask, do you believe surges are based more on random events that can't be predicted? There's something that happens in the antiques and collectibles trade. I referred to this in earlier videos called a catalyst. An example of a catalyst is if we look at vintage comic book collecting. Vintage comic book collecting was somewhat of a niche market all the way up until CGC got involved and started grading those items. Then in 2008, with the release of the very first Iron Man movie and the creation of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that caused comic book prices to soar in value. And now, even today, with the downturn, they're seen as an investable commodity. So there are certain catalysts that can occur in a market, whether good or bad, that changes that collecting category going forward for better or worse. And this is something that you got to understand. If we look at rare coins, CAC was a catalyst that caused that market to go up exponentially when that was created. Okay, one more question here. Sean, what do you plan to do for your 20,000 Q&A series? Are you kidding me? I can't even get through the 18,000 Q&A series. I'm doing my best to get through this Q&A before this channel hits 19,000 subscribers. So with that being said, I'm going to end part 11 here. Let me know your thoughts, comments in the feedback section below, known as the comment section. And if you are subscribed to this channel, I just may see you. You know the rest in another upcoming video.